Ernest, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Maulik. It's been a while and I'm glad to see you as well.
Good to see you. And, as you can imagine, I have tons of questions for you about how you have led this spectacular growth at Globe and also about your vision for the company for the next 10 years. But before we get to that, I'm quite intrigued about your recent hobby. I read somewhere that you have really gotten into cooking lately. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've been following this guy who happens to be my godson. He's been, cooking up a storm during the pandemic, and I figured, hey, if he can do it, I should try to do it. And, it's in one of these family dinners on Sunday. I told him, I'm going to host you guys for dinner. I'm going to go out on a limb and make a dish. And I was actually surprised that everybody enjoyed it. And from then on, I started trying different things, just following people on YouTube and seeing if I can replicate those recipes. And slowly, you begin to try and understand how these ingredients work, the spices work. And, for a guy who didn't even know what a kilo or half a kilo of something ever looked like, I think it's gone pretty well, actually.
And is there a particular cuisine that resonates with you more than others?
Well, the two cuisines probably that I do quite a bit are Thai and Italian. I would say, Thai because it's probably one of the easier, I would say, Asian cuisines to replicate. Italian because of the affinity and simplicity of the cuisine. Actually, the only caveat is you have to start with fantastic ingredients. You don't have to put too many things. And again, spawned by my affinity for the country as well. Before the pandemic, we were going to Italy twice a year, to visit our home in Tuscany.
That's a great part of Italy. Love that place. And if you know how to cook some vegetarian items as well, I'll probably knock on your door one of these days. And I'll bring some Indian food, by the way. I'm an excellent cook when it comes to Indian food. Now, my mom would disagree with that, but enough for people to be impressed with. So maybe one day
then we should cook together because I would love to learn how to cook Indian food because I'm a big fan of Indian food. Yeah, but again, I'm not veg, so but I'd love to learn a good butter chicken from you if I could.
One question I have for you is, a lot of us know you as the CEO of Globe, and prior to that, SBI Technologies. But having followed your career, it appears to me that you are an entrepreneur at heart. So at what age did you know that you had this entrepreneurial streak within you?
I think just growing up, seeing my father and mother and how they went through life running businesses, right? My father started off in his late 20s with a gas station in the 60s and saw him work that business 12 hours a day and then eventually brought that into or morphed it into automobile air conditioning and built a pretty large company along those lines as well. And so I think it's in the blood that to be entrepreneurial. And I've always aspired to be that. My first job in the U.S. out of B school was a very corporate job with Bank of America. And then I went into a systems development role with the large restaurant group that owned the Denny's chain of restaurants and Winchell's Donuts chain, thousands of restaurants, developing mainframe systems. I'm dating myself with mainframe and punch cards. But then again, I actually left that whole corporate world and started my own business again in what was to disrupt traditional printing, the area of digital printing. And maybe one thing most people don't know is I failed in that business.
How so? How did you fail?
I grew the business. It was very successful. I think I started that business in '86. For the first 5 years, it was incredible in terms of the growth. However, I think we were caught in a California recession. And I was living in the US then. And when the rug was pulled under us in terms of demand and just demand for printing, it was a saturated field, and pricing just went down. And one by one, we had to close the retail shops, and just almost took me to bankruptcy, actually. And just, at the end of the day, after settling all the debt, I ended up with just my house as my asset. And that was 92, and I had to start all over again. I think that's, if you wanted something most people don't know about me, that's probably what it is. And so the first ever failure I've had probably in my life was that one. And it's a big one when you have to start all over again.
And what did you do to start all over? Did you start a new business, or you said, you know what, enough of these entrepreneurial ventures, I'll go look for a job somewhere?
Yeah, I think, at that time when you're living in a state where recession is deep, it's very difficult to start anything new. I did some, helping my dad out a little bit with sourcing some of his stuff, and he gave me a small commission on the stuff just to survive, and eventually landed a job with a Japanese-owned firm in the South Bay of Los Angeles in Torrance, and helped them transform their operations, into a digital style of operations. And I think one thing led to another. Eventually became their CFO, and eventually became offered to be the CEO of the company after 4 years. I turned that down, actually, to take on the CEO role at SBI, and came home to the Philippines after 15 long years in the US.
And was it the job with SBI Technology that brought you back to the Philippines, or was there any other reason for you to come back?
No, that was the only reason. As a matter of fact, that was a very tense moment in my marriage, because I accepted the job without consulting my wife, which I would never advise any husband to do.
But I'm sure she's happy now that you're cooking on Sunday.
Absolutely. I think, when we drink our wine during Sundays, we still reminisce and say, how could we have left the Philippines and stayed out that long? We love living in this country now, and I think we're here to stay.
And how did you connect with SBI Technologies?
It was referrals through friends, actually. The gentleman I credit a lot is my compadre, Cesar Purisima, actually. Because we were together in B school, and he's been wanting to get me back to the Philippines, and he keeps pushing my name around. And every time I would visit, he would even schedule interviews, and I would never accept the job. And finally, this one, after visiting the company, I actually, saw the potential of the BPO industry. At that time, there was no term BPO. That was 1997. Yeah. SBI was, the concept of doing work in the Philippines for U.S. companies was novel, and I just could see that this could go very far, and that this had a lot of legs. It's a sunrise industry, and if you could build, more and more use cases for the Filipino talent and Filipino skills, I think this is the growth was going to be incredible, and I think we've been proving right over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you are considered one of the founding fathers of the industry. You saw the potential before anybody else actually heard of the term BPO. So how was it to join Globe with no experience in telco? Take us back to your early days at Globe. Obviously, it was a very different company than what you have built now. But were you overwhelmed? Were you stressed out? Or was it very easy for you to come in with a fresh set of eyes and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, we need to change this?
No, the latter is exactly what I brought to them. But getting it done was the difficult part, because it's a pretty large entity. The good thing was the company had really good people. The company was, you would say, clean. There were no issues with corruption, no issues with, none of that. It's very similar to SBI when I walked in, a very, very clean company. So, I just, I felt that the thing we had to do was change the way the company focused, itself, right? It's very inwardly focused then. It was, I called it then the utility mindset. Where, your utilities are, you don't have to worry too much about customers because they really have no choice, They have to go with you. It's typically monopolies, right? That happen. But we were operating in that manner when the world was highly competitive. There were 3 players in the market then. and Globe was losing share to both players at that time, and I'd become very financially focused, inwardly focused. Focused when they do product. The first thing was it had to make money. I think instead of will it sell, will the customers want it, So that's the first thing we did was change it from, if you want to call it a mindset, utility mindset, to a consumer service mindset, a consumer company. How can a company with millions of customers be not a consumer company, right? So we tried to mimic some of the things that FMCG companies did, try to understand the consumer. And you start from what the consumer's needs and problems are and try to solve them, right? What are they not liking about your product? Can you provide it and provide it profitably? Right? And so we started to just do that first and change the culture around that customer centricity, right? And understanding, to the extent that in the beginning when I joined, I along with other managers sat at call centers, listened to people's problems, worked at the store for a day and stuff like that. It's less relevant now given digital, right? But at that point in time, people really understood. We walked the streets, we went to the sari stores, particularly for me, right? I was a newbie. Imagine no telco experience, no consumer experience. I was a B2B guy. SBI had maybe a roster of 50 clients, right? Large, right? That's all I had to worry about is the large clients. Here you have millions, right, that you have to deal with, and the CapEx was tremendous, right? At SBI, I think our CapEx a year was $10 million, right?
Exactly.
Here it's just an invoice.
Yes.
Our CapEx today is over $1.2 billion. It's tremendous what the scale is. So you just get used to it. So, getting the people passionate about their work, similar to the approach I did at SBI, getting the people passionate about their customer, wanting to deliver, wanting to follow, get them to follow my teaching. So of this centricity, keeping things simple, being fast, right? The disruption, and we just took advantage of that, you would say, gap in the market. The market was about to shift, from the 2G, 3G world of voice and SMS, which, by the way, Globe had lost the battle, right? Because the network wasn't built for that. It was built for SMS. So we bypassed the voice and said, we should fight the next battle that's coming up. Instead of fighting this one, let's give it up, right? It's like in tennis, right? You lost that set, you go to the next one. And hopefully win the next 2 and 3 and win the whole match, right? And so we decided to, focus on being a data company. In everything we did, the way we looked, the way we spoke, we're going to be all data. So we parlayed that into the world of 3G data, eventually morphed it into 4G data, and now we're in 5G, and slowly tried to introduce that concept to people and took advantage of that, right? So, very radical moves I requested from the board, and I'm glad that they approved it, which just changed out the whole network in 1 year, right? Because the network was trashed. It was an old network. It was built for SMS. It's never going to deliver your data. Right. That was the first big move. And then about 6 months into that, we proceeded with an IT transformation. At that time, telcos were in batch mode processing. Now we have to go into real time because data has to be counted real time. You cannot count data today's consumption tomorrow because you will exceed, right? That's why the credit limits in the past wasn't observed because they were batch mode. And today, we're all in real time, So that was, because we wanted to have a great network at the same time, a brand new IT system to compete in the market at that time. So very, very difficult transformation alongside the cultural transformation. And, it just all came together for us, and, we were able to gain market share for, from 2011, I believe it started, all the way up to 16 when we achieved leadership.
How did you go about building your own team? Did you, there are only 2 players in the market here. It's not like there's a huge source of supply you can choose from.
Well, the first thing in any selection process for me, for our senior executive, is cultural fit rather than skill, because I value and think culture is the most important advantage a company has, and again, remember we started off competing against PLDT when we were maybe one half their revenue, one fourth their market cap, right? I mean, we were a small company, right? And we can't outspend them, obviously. Even today, we still can't outspend them, you know. But it's the culture that we have, right? That I think makes us unique, and that's why I checked if I could, this guy, can I have a drink with him? Is this guy someone I would hang out with? Let me. That's you have to tick that box. Will the others do it? So I even have an interview with people they're not going to be reporting to, but just to check and see if they would have a fit, right? And of course, the technical part. A lot of people have the technical know-how and the knowledge, right? But it's really working together and collaborating with others. I think is most difficult.
You talked about the culture. When you are looking for that cultural fit with people, what are those cultural values you're looking for? If someone were to ask you, what is Globe's culture about? How would you describe that?
It's a culture, I think, of openness, and open to ideas, a culture of listening. It's really difficult at this stage because we hire a lot of very intelligent people. And when you have intelligent people, they sometimes don't like to listen. They think they're always right. And you do need intelligent people. That's the dilemma of the whole thing. But, collaboration, ability to work with others, being open to be criticized, being open to debate. And then, of course, thinking out of the box, right? Mm-hmm. So we came up with the values of the company initially to try and frame it. This is how we want you to act, It included things like keep it simple, act with integrity, customers always first, be fast or be last is one of my favorites, and that sort of thing. It's just simple words. Because, when I came, we had a values and mission vision that was consultant written.
Yes.
And, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks good on the wall, but it doesn't touch your heart. Yeah.
I want something that's not going to be ambiguous. Now, once a guy reads it, there's no misinterpretation, right?
Yeah.
How can you misinterpret? Keep it simple. Right? If you're not keeping it simple, then you're doing it wrong. I think it's something even today, right? As one of the things that we've learned is as we grew and as we became leaders in our space, a lot of those values tend to fall back down again, and now we have to resurrect them again, and start to remind people once again in a big way.
Now you're number one in the mobile operations. It's very easy for people to become complacent and say, what, we already are at the top, so we can chill out a little bit, we can relax. So that's another challenge that you have to make sure that people don't become complacent.
And I think sometimes, Maulik, that's more difficult, because we're going through that at the moment, right? Our lead has been cut by PLDT because they've spent so much on the network and they've executed the network like we have. So getting to wake up the people once again is an extremely difficult challenge, especially when, like myself, I've been through it once. Do I want to see it again? Yes. And so, but, the people are responding. We had a very good first quarter, and so hopefully we can restart that momentum once again into 2021.
Something else that is quite intriguing about what you have done within the Globe ecosystem is not just bring your entrepreneurship just for the Globe business model, but when I look at what's happening with Gcash, for example, and some of the other startups within the 917 Ventures group, tell us about how did you go about building that culture of innovation? Because, you were not brought in to build Gcash or Health Now or some of the other companies that you have created and helped them prosper over the years.
Well, building the culture of innovation, I think it starts with saying we allow failure, or at least I allow it. And so, I'm not going to fire you or trying something. Probably will fire you because you didn't try anything, and try to stick with the old ways. And walk the talk. A lot of the ideas, I have to admit, still come from me today, which is probably one of the biggest issues. That's why I'm trying to institutionalize that with 917 Ventures, with a group of entrepreneurs and residents who are trying to come up with new ideas. But really, it's all about looking at what customers need at the moment, right? And even to a certain degree, anticipating that they will need it in the future. And that's this Gcash story, in a sentence. Because Gcash was around when I arrived. But imagine doing Gcash with SMS. You would have to have a book, to put all the codes, right? And that's what they had. They had codes. If you want to pay someone, you got to put, SMS, put the phone number. I mean, it was SMS, right? But the concept was solid. And so I decided to put that on the back burner and keep it on life support for the right time. And, as when I was seeing that the banking system in the Philippines hadn't evolved, the unbanked, underbanked population was barely moving in terms of reducing that population. And data networks coming into their own and smartphone penetration was increasing. We set it up for growth. We spun it off and then eventually brought in the right partner. That's one of the things we do at Globe is we partner very well. We're not the type of guys who say we can do everything. I look for our gaps, look at where we're great at. We execute on that piece of it, and then find a partner who will complement that and hopefully build exponential growth like we have in Gcash. And obviously, I think this is one of the businesses that flourished during the pandemic because it directly addressed people's needs. It helped us change the mindset of people about digital payments because we were espousing it. We were growing, before that, but it was a normal pace of growth, right? But the 12 months beginning March of 2020 to March of this year is exponential growth, right? And the team also delivered in terms of the use cases, one after another, because the platform was wonderful, right? It scales, right? Can you imagine going from, at that time, I think we had maybe 15 million users to 40 million users in 1 year, I can't tell you the actives, but it's multiples of what we had.
Yeah.
Right. 8 million daily transactions in the platform today and growing. 2 trillion pesos moving through the platform a year. It's just incredible, right? So I guess people now at Globe believe me when I say this company could even be more valuable than us eventually.
Well, I mean, isn't it the first unicorn? I mean, you guys, based on the recent funding, Gcash is valued at more than $1 billion right now.
Oh, easily. I think it could be over 2, actually.
And what has been your biggest fear, and have you had a chance to overcome it yet?
No, because I think constant fear is good, and the fear of being disrupted. Because I like to be the disruptor. I don't want to be disrupted. So I have this paranoia that that paranoia that drives me to keep on evolving the company. And that's why I built 917 Ventures and stuff. Because telco, I think, at the end of the day, is mature, right? It's going to be X growth in a few years. Analysts may not like me saying that, or my CFO, but I think it will happen because you see it across the world. It's happening. So, that fear has to be always in you.